Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Ashley and I'm so happy to have you here. I'm happy to talk about this topic today. I originally wasn't going to address this, but I got a comment about it some time ago, and then a couple other of my friends brought it up, and I was like, okay, this is something that maybe I should talk about a little bit. So there's another creator on YouTube that's had a long-standing channel talking about Calabria. She's lived in Calabria for quite some time, and I'm actually going to link her video, the one that I'm referring to, in the description box of this video. But in any case, she described Calabria as a shithole. And you know what? This video is not like a response video or something like that, okay? I'm not coming after her as a creator. That's her opinion and that's her experience. I understand that she's been living in Calabria for a very long time, and she's certainly dealt with some of the issues that are typical within Calabria. And I really respect her perspective, okay? I should say, and I've said many, many times to my friends, to other people that have moved to Italy, and specifically Calabria, that Calabria non è per tutti, okay? And that's just the reality of the situation, okay? I think that Calabria is a wonderful place for people that have families there, for people that have ancestral ties to Calabria, for people that understand the culture and like the culture. My channel is geared more towards people of Italian or Calabrian descent living in the United States that want to know more about their ancestral ties, that want to know more about the history, the culture, and so on, okay? That is sort of my bread and butter on this channel. Okay, she has a totally different perspective and she has a totally different idea on her channel, and that's her perspective. I totally respect it. And you know what? In all honesty, I don't completely disagree with her, okay? But I just think that we're coming from very different worlds. There are some issues in Calabria that I think make living in Calabria very difficult for people, particularly people that are not part of the culture, or particularly people that move there with very high expectations about what life is going to be like there. And then when they get there and they're met with reality of what Calabria actually has to offer. Now, for a person like me, it works out great. I love it there. I have my people there. I understand the culture. I speak the language. Ultimately, it's not that big of a culture shock for me to go back there. I have ancestral ties to the land, okay? But for someone that doesn't, and for someone that's going there mostly because they think it's beautiful and they want to have a more relaxed life, it's going to be a big slap in the face because it's not such an easy place to live. I absolutely agree with that point. And something that cited a lot, and something that I have even brought up on this channel before, is just how traditional Calabria is. I think it can be very daunting and very difficult for some people to fit into the mold of traditional family values. And I'm not just talking about like, you know, having a mom stay home and the father goes to work and all this kind of stuff. Okay, I'm talking about like fiercely protecting gender roles in a way that I think, particularly in American culture, but I think even parts of Western Europe, this is quite challenging to deal with. And if you're a person that doesn't fit within that mold, it can be very overwhelming. And of course, when it comes to traditional family values and fitting within those gender roles, let's say, it really depends on what your values are. I don't particularly like it, but I'm not going to be concerned with other people that want to live that way. That's the way they choose to live, okay? And if I feel uncomfortable living in that society, then I'll find my way around or I'll find my way out. That's it. Now, another issue that is major is that it's very difficult to find work there. I'm extremely privileged in this way because I'm self-employed. I don't ever have to worry about this, and I've never had to worry about this during the entire time that I've lived in Calabria. It's never been an issue for me. But I've seen time and time again people that move to Calabria with the intention to find work, or maybe they're processing their citizenship and they need to find work in the meantime. And it's very difficult on top of worker exploitation that I mentioned in one of my previous videos, okay? But yeah, I mean, it's a legitimate issue. If you go to Calabria, you're going to have a hard time finding work. It's not an easy place to find a good job. It's not an easy place to find a job, period, especially one that's year round because a lot of the work there is seasonal. So if you're looking for a job and you go there, it's going to be hard to find one in the first place, let alone find a job that's a good job that's backed by insurance and has, worker benefits and a decent employer and all of that. Okay. These are major factors. And so I absolutely agree with the fact that I don't think you should move there if you're depending on trying to find income there. If you're going there for seasonal work, fine. If you're self-employed and you're not depending on finding work outside of yourself, then fine. You might really, really love living there. But if you're depending on a Calabrian income, might not be such a great time for you. Okay. There's an issue in making friends. Now, I have not struggled with this, again, because I speak the language. I'm part of the culture. It's not an issue for me to fit in. But if you're a person that either doesn't speak the language, or even if you're a person from Italy, coming from another part of Italy and you move there, it might be hard to adapt to the culture. It might be hard to find friends because it's just a very different mentality of the people that live within Calabria, okay? And this is tough. This is really tough. I know a lot of, and I always talk about the Argentinians on my channel, but the reason why is because there are so many of them that move to Calabria for getting their paperwork done and their citizenship, and they go there, they find work, and they find that it's really challenging to make friends with the Calabrian locals. Part of that is a language barrier, for sure. And even if you speak Italian, you might find yourself in a situation where you have a language barrier because a lot of people speak dialect. It is a challenge, and I think it's one that can be overcome. But if you're a person that isn't willing to put yourself out there, go out, meet people. In my case, I didn't have to do any of that because I was sort of adopted into this family, and they introduced me to everybody in the neighborhood and everybody in the community. So it was very easy for me to make connections. But if you're relying on yourself, it can be really challenging to break down those barriers. Another issue is the infrastructure and the public transportation in particular, but the infrastructure is not very well developed. And I mention this because it's quite difficult to get around Calabria if you don't have a vehicle. Okay, I have talked about this before in one of my videos referring to tourism in Calabria, that I recommended getting a car because Calabria is so rural and it's so spaced out that if you don't have a car, it's very difficult to go anywhere. Okay, there are some buses, there are some trains, but most of those trains are regional trains or maybe local. You can get up and down the train lines, but outside of those areas, which is where the majority of Calabria lies, it's quite difficult to get around if you don't have your own car. So that is a major issue. And if you're a person that's moving to Calabria and you don't have a car, it would be very hard to get around. This is something that I don't know how they can improve it, because I'm not sure that there is a need for it, but I don't know, because people have kind of adapted to living like that. I don't know if that will ever change. And to kind of branch off of this, especially during the summertime, there are a lot of issues with the water supply. There are issues with the electricity. Sometimes the water just stops working in the summertime, especially at nighttime in smaller communities and villages. I've lived in several different places where that was an issue. And even in some places like this last summer where I was staying, they said that there should be water all year round. And it was funny because when I signed my lease, they were like, there should be water all year. I'm like, okay. But as a matter of fact, a few days during the summer, it did actually get shut off. Okay. So, even these kinds of basic things that sometimes people take for granted, you just sort of assume you're going to have running water. You just sort of assume that you're going to have electricity. Okay. These things are not always guaranteed. Now, they're not usually shut off for long periods of time. They might be shut off during the nighttime. But if you're not used to that, that would be a big shock. You would be like, what the hell is going on? Why don't I have water right now? I want to wash my feet. I want to take a shower. especially in the summertime when you go out, you've spent all day on the beach, you partied, whatever, you go back home and then you can't take a shower. It's not the greatest experience, okay? I totally understand that. So these kinds of things can be an issue, and certainly to a certain extent a culture shock, right? Because I mean, especially if you're coming from a place like the United States, that's not usually something that you would encounter. That might be something that happens once in a great while. It would be a total fluke, okay? But that's a regular thing that a lot of Calabrians have to deal with. And again, they've sort of adapted to this. This isn't an issue for them. It's also not unexpected. It's totally expected. As a matter of fact, they start to tell you, we might be experiencing some water shortages, okay? So all that to say, it's something that I think a lot of people would struggle with if they tried to live there. And just to kind of harp on this issue of cultural differences, I mean, Calabria is very misunderstood in a way. The culture is very misunderstood. It's very difficult to describe it if you're not part of it, if you didn't grow up in that community, or if you haven't spent long periods of time there. I mean, even for other Italians, when they go to Calabria, it's kind of a shock for them. It's a bit challenging, the way that Calabrians communicate with each other, the expectations that they have, the code of conduct, just the way of life. These are people that are living in a very rural part of the country. They have a very different lifestyle compared to the rest of Italy. And so this is something I actually really enjoy. Again, it's not hard for me to adapt to this because I've been living there for a really long time, and I understand the mentality involved with living in these kinds of communities. I also come from a relatively small rural community within the United States, okay? So I think for people that come from big cities, that come from different cultures, that don't speak the language, that maybe have high expectations, they think it's going to be just this beautiful, luxurious place. Well, there are parts of the region that are like that, okay? But it's certainly not the whole place. It can be quite shocking, okay? So I do agree with some of what she said in principle, okay? And I will even piggyback on the idea that if you don't like the culture, if you don't speak the language, if you find certain aspects of living there so problematic that it's uncomfortable for you to live there and you're not enjoying your life, then I don't think that you should live there. I don't think that you should stay. For people that want to live there, that enjoy the culture, they have an open idea as to what the way of life is in Calabria, and they're open to just adapting to that lifestyle. I think that Calabria is a wonderful place, and I think that you can live a really beautiful life there. That's my recommendation. And I would ultimately say that I hope that people that want Calabria to change so much don't come and don't stay, because a lot of Calabrians don't want it to change, okay? A lot of Calabrians want it to stay the same. And ultimately, those are the people of the land. Those are the people that should be making those kinds of decisions, right? I don't think that there's anything wrong with preserving some of these traditions. Not every place is for everyone. And as I said at the very beginning of this video, Calabria is one of those places. It's not for everyone. So all that to say, if you want to come to Calabria, you want to enjoy it, you're more than welcome. People are very warm and friendly, welcoming. They love to show people the culture. They love to share about Calabrian lifestyle and culture. And I think that you'll be surprised at how much you can learn from the average Calabrian person, especially people working in agriculture. They have a really beautiful way of doing sustainable agriculture there. But, it might just be a better place for some people to go on vacation, and there's nothing wrong with that. It brings in quite a lot of tourism, and it brings in quite a lot of money for the locals. So thank you very much. And, I wish her the best. Again, I want to be very clear. This video was not me taking a shot at her as a creator. She's totally entitled to her perspective, and actually I very much appreciate her perspective. So that's it. That's all I've got on this topic. Thank you very much for watching today. Thank you for supporting this channel, liking, commenting, subscribing. All of that really helps me out a lot, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.